revered Sadguru Sri Madhusudan Sai, Dr. R. Balasubramaniam, and Mr. Ridham Desai, other special invitees, distinguished members of WMG, and my beloved colleagues in the profession who are part of this assembly. A very pleasant good evening to all of you. It gives me immense pleasure to be part of the proceedings of this symposium, where most of the deliberations are going to be on, how to create new India. What is the way forward and the future? My talk will be slightly different because to get inspired to look forward to create a bright future, you need to celebrate the glorious past. And what happened a decade ago in terms of a unique corporate turnaround story, I'm here standing before you to share. And for the benefit of those who did not closely follow Satyam's story, I want to clarify that I became director after the scam, not before the scam. So that whatever I say, you will receive it in the right perspective. Now, just taking a look at, the corporate world, as all of us know, is enamored by various kinds of frauds across the globe. But of all those frauds, the significant one is the financial statement related fraud because of the magnitude and the impact, adverse impact it can create on all the stakeholders and the impact it can create on market depletion overnight. And in terms of moving further, if you dive deep into, next slide, dive deep into what are the root causes for these kinds of frauds to occur in the corporate world. There can be any number of reasons. I have highlighted the significant ones, but even among this, the most significant one is the common one is the greed. Now, once human mind is engulfed with this kind of a greed, then it's very difficult, and it can be destructive and dangerous. Like Mahatma Gandhi mentioned, there is enough for everybody's need, but not for anybody's greed. And so because of that, and greed doesn't confine to becoming rich or prosperous. Greed can be for even market rating or positioning. It can be power, greed related to power, position, designation, so many things that unfortunately lead to undesirable, unpalatable consequences. And if you look at the major frauds, starting from Enron, WorldCom, all those frauds that happened in US, Western world, which led to the enactment of Sarbanes-Oxley Act, India experienced it for the first time through Satyam. In fact, those days when I used to travel overseas, they called it as Enron of India, that kind of a fraud. And Satyam was the fourth largest IT company those days in India. And it grew very fast in the 80s. And it started in the 80s, but grew very fast post the 2000 era. And 53,000 employees and $2 billion top line and 66 country operations. But it all crumbled on 7th of January 2009 when there was a confession made by the promoter that the books were fudged, accounts were fudged for 6 years. Satyam is a unique case. It was not a case of investigation triggering preceding confession. It was a case where confession triggered the investigation. And it was also unique in another context, which I'm going to narrate. It's a turnaround where there was no public money invested by the government. It was public-private partnership. Government offered the moral support, and certain group of individuals came together and turned it around with the help of employees, Satyamites. And what was the nature of the fraud? The fraud was in terms of fictitious billing, fudging the accounts, manipulating the top line. While on one side they were producing software solutions, another side one group was producing fictitious bills. Now, to a group like this, enlightened CFO group, it doesn't take me to explain elaborately. Suffice it to say, when you book fictitious top line, you have to show it as collected. And you cannot show it as collected from across the globe in cash or dollars. It has to be routed through bank accounts. So bank statements were fudged. And once you show it as collected, you should either show it as expended or invested. And such huge amount, it is very difficult to show as expended without corroboratory evidence or to create numerous evidence. So therefore, it was shown as invested as what? Fixed deposits in banks. And therefore, fictitious fixed deposit receipts were produced. And once you show fictitious fixed deposits in banks, you have to account for interest income in the income tax return. Software income was exempt, but interest income was taxable. So you have to pay tax on that. In fact, CBDT chairman in a lighter vein asked me, Manoharan, if we reopen Satyam's case, whether we have to refund the tax paid on non-existent income. I told him at that time I had to be very diplomatic. Being a government nominee, I said, we are yet to study from that dimension. Good that I said that, because after a few months I came to know that even the tax credits claimed were bogus from foreign tax credit. So one led to the other. The whole thing, as CA students, those days I remember in the late 70s, we used to debate whether accounting is an art or a science. But after entering Satyam, I realized it could be a fiction. And, that was a time when global financial crisis was preceded by subprime crisis. What was subprime crisis? US loan market was bubbling with this secondary, subprime lending, where merely on self-declaration loans were given. And many of the borrowers, as a matter of principle, did not pay interest, and in their own interest did not repay the principal borrowed also. With the result, what happened, as CFOs we know, in a balance sheet on the right-hand side, assets, on the left-hand side, capital, reserves, and liabilities. Suddenly, the American banks realized one fine day, the global financial crisis hit them. On the right-hand side, nothing was left, and on the left, nothing was right. Satyam was also exactly in the same position when we walked in. 5,000 crores of fixed deposits were non-existing on the right-hand side. And to that extent, reserves were inflated on the left-hand side. So that was, and monthly salary bill was 500 crores. And US salaries were fortnightly, and rest of the world was monthly. And there was no money in the kitty. And 2,000 crores were outstanding for vendors and suppliers. And PF, ESI, TDS remittance defaulted. And 700 crores were dues from customers, but we did not know how much of that was genuine and how much is receivable. So this was the background in which the confession was done. There could have been many reasons for confession, but one final reason seems to be that global financial crisis led to draining down of inflow of orders. Many of the IT companies, top IT companies, interviewed candidates, the new, rolled out graduates, but they were not sent joining letters. That was a scenario where IT company, that industry itself was facing a lull or a recessionary scenario when this confession came and much stronger order on the face of the ground reality. Now, Satyam was listed in US also. And, they tried to bridge the gap. Actually, what the promoter did as a last attempt to rescue Satyam or cover up Satyam was, he wanted to merge it with Matos, companies belonging to the sons. Matos, if you read alphabetically, it is the reverse of Satyam. And it had huge land bank. So they wanted to merge Matos with Satyam so that real asset, land will come on the balance sheet of Satyam. And these fictitious fixed deposits will be shown as having been paid as consideration, so that fictitious asset will be replaced by real asset. But Satyam shareholders did not know this truth. Therefore, they voted against such a merger, and it did not happen. That's why the promoter wrote in the confession letter, you find this wording, it was like riding a tiger, not knowing how to get off without being eaten. Kind of, I think Shakespeare, poetry, you get reminded by this, even in that. It all indicates that it must have started in a small way, and they would have hoped to clear it in the next quarter, next year. But, the magnitude went beyond their comprehension. Next slide. Who got affected? Investors, employees, customers, bankers, government. Government was concerned about the reputation of the country, because that was the time when global investors were looking at India as a safe destination for investment. And we were also propagating, and IT industry was the one that put India prominently on the international map, global map. So in that scenario, government had to act immediately. America followed bailout plan methodology on one hand for the banks, and it also allowed some companies to collapse. Market forces to decide the destiny, like Lehman Brothers, AIG. But Indian government thought out of the box. They did not choose both, because that was the election time in 2009. So they felt no taxpayers' money will be spent for this, only public-private partnership. And we will not also allow market forces to determine the destiny of Satyam, because the reputation and image of the country is involved. Therefore, they nominated 6 of us, dissolving the then existed board, which was most of them, executive directors, were already in the jail. So therefore, it got dissolved. And we were given complete freedom, and we prioritized, financial stability and customer retention and employee motivation. Those were the things, and we also did all other things that were required. I will not elaborate on all that. But strategically, we decided to meet once in a week, because it was a crisis situation. And, but whatever we decided as a strategy, one of us had to stay there and oversee and implement and also give feedback. We had stalwarts like Deepak Parekh, Kiran Karnik, Achyudan, Tarun Das on the board, brilliant minds. I was only a tool, facilitating the implementation. So I offered to stay there 24/7, not because I was unemployed, but because just then I completed serving the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, 2 years staying in Delhi as the vice president and president. So having stayed away from my profession and family for 2 years, I thought this is another situation that demands my attention on a full-time basis, so I lived there. So for 15 weeks, I was doing everything which the promoter would have done except the fraud. And I did this SWOT analysis, and the idea was very simple: how to, exploit the strength of Satyam, more particularly in terms of the excellent talent pool, and in terms of weaknesses, how to, make them subdued, do not come in the way as an hindrance for turning around. And in terms of opportunities, how to explore and exploit them. And in terms of threats, how to overcome them or bypass them. That is how, the strategy was done. And the modus operandi was immediate stopgap arrangement. We organized from IDBI Bank and Bank of Baroda. And we started clearing dues. In fact, many employees came and said, we are willing to forego our variable pay. Some of them said, we are willing to forego the entire thing. On the other hand, there were insecure employees who wanted to resign and go. So we spoke to them. We told them, you are what you are because of Satyam. We are strangers to Satyam. We have come here at the call of the government to turn it around. If you desert the company at this stage, later you will feel guilty of not paying back the gratitude, show the gratitude of the company which made you somebody in life, and therefore join hands with us, help us to facilitate, and then we will celebrate down the line few months later, and then you are free to migrate anywhere you want. That worked. Similarly, for customers, we said, please don't migrate. This is a situation where we are keen on turning around. Patronize us for a few weeks. Wait and watch. If things go positively, you continue to support. Otherwise, you tell us you want to migrate. We will facilitate migration to a competitive service provider. even if the competitor doesn't have the bandwidth to execute your, because Satyam was a unique, some of the projects, only Satyam had the bandwidth to execute. That kind of a project. So we will rebadge our workers on the payroll of the competitors or your own payroll so that the project continuity is ensured. So with that kind of a transparent talk, they said we will wait and watch, but on one condition, we should have a follow-up call every week for fortnightly. So with that understanding, we could retain most of the customers, most of the employees, and we even circulated video clippings and all that to different locations. At one stage, we had to take an immediate decision whether to continue like this for a few years till we clean up the whole thing, or immediately, as is various condition, offer it for strategic investor to invest and take control. We decided that it is in ICU, we cannot prolong it too long, and therefore we initiated the bidding process. And initially we got 141 registrations, but later we found many of them were fictitious or did not have the track record. I mean, Satyam had too many fictitious things happening all through the journey of turnover also. And finally, 10 submitted the expression of interest. I mean, out of that, 7 fulfilled the criteria to whom we sent the documents. Only 5 submitted, then 2 withdrew, 3 stayed in the race. And Wilbur Ross, L&T, and Tech Mahindra. In fact, I was, and they had to be facilitated for due diligence and all those things. So we created a virtual and physical data room, and we gave site inspection, we clarified legal, all those points. And the D-Day was fixed as 13th of April, 2009, for submitting the bids. And I was addressing the leaders and others every vertical on a weekly basis, leaders every evening. So the previous evening, I was addressing Oracle division, few in the auditorium and few hundreds on the call. So I clarified to them, I gave them the good news that next week, hopefully, we'll have a new owner for Satyam. After answering all their questions, one executive stood up and asked one final question. I said, go ahead. He said, suppose on 13th April, nobody walks in to buy Satyam. What is that you are going to do? My heart skipped a beat, because that was something unthinkable. But I don't know where from I had the answer coming. So I told them, don't worry, we have plan B. They cheered and dispersed. But after they left, I was wondering, what is that plan B I was talking about? So but at that point in time, what was significant was to retain their morale and not let them down. Then, of course, that led to all these changes. In fact, the government withdrew the bill that was pending before the parliament and made further changes, brought in many changes, and then reintroduced it and got it passed, the New Companies Act. And the SEBI also came out with many changes in the regulations and all that. So I will not elaborate on this. Then next, in close quarters, having seen Satyam turnaround, I found many things, though we learn it through our, Vedas and epics, all the moral lessons that are told to us, both in the schools and discourses, it get buried, or, sometimes you will have to make them surface by introspection. So I could introspect all these things, especially for, finance executives. Satyam finance executives were the worst affected. They were not, they were summoned by investigating agencies with an eye of suspicion, multiple agencies, right from, enforcement directorates, CBI, and state CBDI, all of them, and even this, Ministry of Corporate Affairs, SFIO, all those agencies, and that dented their social status and image. The neighbors instructed their children not to play with the children of the Satyam executives. And when a Satyam executive walked into a function, social function, all of them gave way, not because he is a VIP, suddenly he became untouchable. Nobody wanted to show that he is related to him or known to him. And some of the Satyam employees, the son or daughter alliance fixed, they were not sure whether it will go through. Some of them wanted money out of their savings for certain expenditure, or higher education of the children, suddenly they realized most of their savings were stuck up in ESOPs of Satyam, which was not worth the paper on which it was printed, because the share price came down to 6 rupees. So all that, and earlier Satyam employees were premium customers in any joint they walked in. Later, the story was just the opposite. In fact, they were feeling ashamed to disclose that they were employees of Satyam. These were all ground realities. And in life's, in accountancy, we know there is contra entry. Every credit has a debit and vice versa. But in life's books of account, there is no contra entry allowed. You may do 10 good things, one bad thing can wipe out all the credit accumulated out of good things. And, I don't want to run through each and every one of that. Actually, good people don't need laws to tell them what to do, what not to do. They know by themselves. But similarly, bad people, whatever be the amendment that you bring about in the law, they always try to find out ways and means to circumvent it. Because morality cannot be legislated. At best, conduct can be regulated. That is what the government is attempting to do. And we should learn to differentiate between opportunities and temptations. While we should not miss opportunities, we should not be lured by temptations. And maybe the promoter of Satyam loved wealth and used people to create it. Actually, in life, we should love people and use wealth to spread it. Because life by itself has no meaning. Life is only an opportunity for us to give it a meaning. First 25 years or so we learn, next 35, 40 years or so we earn, but life becomes more meaningful when you share what you have earned and what you have learned to those who are in need of it. So that is how life can become more meaningful. And that is how you can live beyond the age in the hearts of all those beneficiaries whom you touch. And you may reach the top by sheer vision, hard work, competitiveness. But to stay there, you need integrity. Otherwise, the fall could be mighty. That is another lesson. And in fact, we were chairing the board meeting in turns, every week's board meeting. So when my turn came in the initial days to chair, whoever chaired had to be the spokesperson to the media to brief what is not so confidential or secretive, because we cannot disclose everything. So I briefed that day's certain decisions, and Q&A began. One of the journalists asked me, Manoharan, you are all temporary directors nominated by the government. Satyam is a sinking ship. What is that you can do? So he emphasized on, you are all temporary directors. Again, with all humility at my command, I smiled at him and said, we are all temporary in this world, but we can build institutions which are permanent in this world. We can resurrect organizations which can stay eternal. So we are mortals, but institutions need not be. Principles need not be. Values need not be. You have to be adaptive to the technological evolution, but fundamentals we have to stay strong all through, irrespective of the changes that happen around us. So that philosophy, I think, was one of the greatest learnings. In fact, Satyam survived because of this strong fundamentals. Only the accounts were fudged, operations, the culture of work culture, all those things, and second line, third line, even when the top line vanished, the company could survive. And in fact, I told you, the customers insisted on follow-up call. Every call, they used to grill me with so many questions, initial days. Gradually, the number of questions mellowed down, came down, and the confidence was there. After answering all their questions, I used to ask them one question. How is the project delivery? How is the service delivery by the Satyamites? You know what was the answer? Unanimously from all the customers. Before the scam, it was good. Now it is the best. Which implied that the Satyam employees understood its do or die situation, now or never. They put their heart and soul. And if you ask me one single factor that was instrumental, it's not government has to be applauded for this brilliant idea. Government nominated boards did what best. In fact, as I said, entire credit should go to all those legendary personalities on the board. I was only a tool facilitating implementation. And, but the greatest contributors have been the Satyamites, the employees. And of course, when we do our duty without expectations, that's what Lord Krishna told Arjuna, isn't it? So do your duty, unmindful of the consequences or rewards. I think if that is practiced by us day to day, that's what I tell my students also for CA exams. CA exams, I tell them, because CA, many people think CA means come again. I used to tell them it is not come again, it is conquer again and again. So if you have perseverance and if you put your heart and soul, give your best, success may not come when you want it, the way you want it. But if you have perseverance, success will definitely come one day. And as and when it comes, it will be much better than what you wanted. That is the learning. And finally, nothing is impossible if you have that nobility or good intent to accomplish what you want to accomplish. So that is a great learning, because, the whole universe conspires to make it happen. That, in the very first board meeting, I proposed it that there's a call of the nation. Let us not charge any sitting fee or compensation. Let us work pro bono. It was unanimously agreed and passed. In fact, that I came to know was a critical fact which influenced all the global customers who said, later after the turnaround celebrative time, they said, we supported you because we came to know of this. You are all working pro bono. It will not happen in our country. They confessed. It is India where this can happen. So therefore, we started giving weightage to whatever you people said. We started listening to whatever you wanted to say. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the wonderful opportunity. I'm equally eager to listen to the stalwarts who are going to talk about the future of India, and maybe in Q&A I'll also join them. Thank you very much.